Black Panther: Wakanda Forever has finally made it to Disney+. That kind of feels like the last step of a movie's journey these days, doesn't it? The embattled sequel to 2018's Black Panther has finally wrapped up its theatrical run, so let's spend some time looking back at its commercial and critical performance, as well as its impact on the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. First, the movie was well received by critics and fans when it first came out. There was a lot of skepticism about how the movie would turn out. Wakanda Forever was on the MCU slate for a long time, but soon after director Ryan Coogler finished the first draft of the screenplay, the series was rocked by the passing of Chadwick Boseman. That led to production delays and a complete rewrite of the story. But then the movie finally went into production, but then the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Not only did that set the movie itself back, but Letitia Wright went ahead and tweeted anti-vaccine videos too. This was a problem because, as we now know, she was to become the next Black Panther. But the cast and crew overcame all these obstacles and turned out a movie that actually shattered all expectations. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, the movie may have fallen short of the lofty rating of its predecessor. An 84% rating is nothing to sneeze at. And while the first movie had a lower audience score, Wakanda Forever blew that out of the water with a 94% audience rating. Critics and fans lavished praise on the way the movie paid tribute to Chadwick Boseman, as well as the performances of Letitia Wright, Angela Bassett, and Tenoch Huerta. Speaking of that last one, the adaptations of Namor and Talakan were particularly well received. Not too shabby considering the road the movie took to get here. Wakanda Forever indeed. Now you won't be surprised to hear that all that positivity translated to a strong box office performance. Phase 4 of the MCU happened to have some of the franchise's weaker box office performances. They were dominant by the standards of any other movie, and yet weren't quite hitting the numbers these movies used to hit. Wakanda Forever destroyed the trend, grossing almost $450 million in North America alone, and then another $390-ish million in the rest of the world. That left the movie with an almost billion-dollar haul. It finishes as the 6th highest grossing film of the year, falling behind giants like the Avatar, Top Gun, Jurassic World, and Minions sequels. On its opening weekend, the movie raked in around $332 million, half of its total gross. That makes it the third largest opening weekend a movie has had in the pandemic era, falling behind its MCU buddies Spider-Man: No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. That also makes Wakanda Forever the most successful opening of the pandemic era, with no traces of Benedict Cumberbatch. The movie was absolutely crushing the box office throughout its theatrical run, which lasted a good long while too. Released before Thanksgiving, the movie was only retired from the big screen once Avatar: The Way of Water was finally ready to emerge from beneath the waves. Speaking of which, the movie has actually set another new record for the MCU. That has to do with its Disney Plus launch. Moving on, this is the longest D+ users have had to wait for a Marvel movie. Now, a huge part of the selling point of Disney's streaming service is access to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a promise that even if you don't catch a Marvel movie in the theaters, you'll be able to watch it on this service eventually. It was initially poised to hit the streamer on the 20th of January, but Disney has recently announced that the movie will instead be coming on the 1st of February. It's a 10-day delay, annoying but not the end of the world. However, with this delay, Wakanda Forever will be the movie that takes the longest to reach Disney+. Let's make some comparisons. Now, we only have to compare it to movies released after the launch of Disney+, and on that list, Multiverse of Madness rushed onto the service the fastest, just 47 days. Thor: Love and Thunder and Eternals stepped it up by about 20 days, with the former releasing 62 days after theaters and the latter coming in at 68 days. Shang-Chi was the record holder so far, having taken 70 days to hit the streamer. Wakanda Forever, from its release date to February 1st, is going to be a whopping 82 days. It's the longest wait we've seen in the franchise, and it isn't even close. Now, what's going on here? Well, there are two main reasons for this. The first is that the movie has performed really consistently throughout its run. This isn't as common as you'd think, especially for Marvel movies. Most movies will have a massive surge of audiences turning up for the opening weekend, and then rapidly taper off as the theatrical run goes on. There are also times that movies are hurt by bad word of mouth. That happened in some corners of the internet with Multiverse of Madness, and Love and Thunder was disappointing across the board. Wakanda Forever, meanwhile, kept drawing crowds the whole time it was in theaters. If not for Avatar, Disney might have tried to keep the movie in theaters throughout the month of January, taking it off the marquee only to make room for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania's 17th of February release date. date. There was also the fact that with Wakanda Forever and The Way of Water being Disney's gigantic tentpoles for the 2022 holiday season, they didn't have too many movies coming out in this period. That left more room for these two giants to hoover up all the money in the world, especially with the swift entry and exit of Strange World from theaters. All this being said, Wakanda Forever won't hold this record for long. No Way Home still hasn't come to Disney Plus over a year after its release, so it's going to win this contest by default whenever it does drop. Enough with the numbers though, let's talk about where the movie fits in the franchise. Y'all know that Marvel Studios will drop updates on their scheduling for the phases of the MCU, and for a long while, Wakanda Forever was set to release during Phase 5 of the franchise, with the Fantastic Four movie set to close out Phase 4 of the series. It was only at this year's Comic-Con that Marvel unveiled a whole new schedule for the series, which placed Wakanda Forever at the end of Phase 4 and kicked off Phase 5 with Quantumania. With the benefit of hindsight, we think that this was the right call. These phases don't just lead up to the Avengers two-parter at the climax, but the movies in a phase are often linked by a common theme. In the case of Phase 4, the unifying theme of the project seems to be grief. A lot of Phase 4 features grief as a theme. Eternals saw characters grieving the death of Ajak, Multiverse of Madness has Strange grieving his relationship with Christine Palmer, and Thor Love and Thunder gave Thor something to grieve with the death of Jane Foster. On Disney Plus, Wanda terrorized Westview out of grief for Vision, and Clint tried to find the Christmas spirit through his grief for Nat. Wakanda Forever is really the right movie to close this phase off, as the characters grieve the death of T'Challa, and we grieve the death of Chadwick Boseman. In contrast, it looks like Phase 5 is going to engage with the storylines of the multiverse saga. We're starting off the phase with Quantumania, which will introduce the movie's big bad, or one of them anyway, Kang the Conqueror. That movie will establish the role Kang will play in the story, and probably tell us a lot more about how things will work with all the Kang variants and how the multiversal conflict will pan out. The Marvels is also rumored to feature multiverse stuff that was introduced in the movies of Phase 4. Meanwhile, Captain America New World Order and Thunderbolts will resolve the storyline that Phase 4 was building with Valentina's cameos. At this point, we know that Valentina is setting up her own team of pseudo-Avengers, but the only question we have is why. That question will probably be answered on Disney Plus with series like Secret Invasion, Ironheart, Echo, and maybe even the new Daredevil show. Wakanda Forever would have contributed to the Thunderbolts storyline somewhat, since Valentina was more prominent in that flick. But overall, it wouldn't gel with the more action-packed movies that are going to have tons of world-changing stuff going down. Considering how much that movie is focused on that theme of grief, it fits in so well with the rest of Phase 4 that its inclusion there is kind of a no-brainer. In fact, the movie belongs in the exact place on the slate, the ending of Phase 4. Finally, Wakanda Forever is about grief, but it's also about moving on. Lift Me Up is a great song and a brilliant comeback from Rihanna. But more than that, the scene in which it's used is the perfect bridge from Phase 4's somber tone to the more exciting and high-stakes fare of the next year of Marvel movies. Early in the movie, Ramonda tells her daughter Shuri about the ritual of burning one's own funeral clothes. This signifies the end of the mourning period, but Shuri is convinced that if she goes through with this, she'll lose T'Challa forever, and she doesn't buy Ramonda's advice to find her brother's spirit through meditation. These themes are reflected elsewhere in the movie too. No one is willing to succeed T'Challa as Black Panther, and the world takes advantage of the fact that Wakanda has no protector. Shuri's embrace of the Black Panther role and the burning of those funeral clothes later signifies that Shuri has accepted the fact that the one she lost is now gone. This was a realization many characters had throughout this phase. As she picks up T'Challa's legacy where he left it, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wraps up its exploration of a world after Thanos and faces its next crisis head-on. That's it for today's video. Have you watched Wakanda Forever? If you haven't, you must be so excited for it to come to Disney Plus. And if you have, let us know in the comments section below if you're gearing up for a rewatch. But whatever you do, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.